Check, check, check.
Good afternoon.
And welcome to the City of Daytona Beach Growth Management Workshop. Today is August 24th, 2022. We're delighted to be coming to you from the historic, famous Yvonne Scarlett Golden Center. This time I would like to introduce our City Manager, Mr. Derek C. Fietcher.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Commissioners. Tonight, we're going to be talking about growth. The elected officials have been asking us about growth, so we wanted to go through the entire process. What's significant about tonight for us also is that our technology, information technologies department, we're trying to figure out how can we host meetings throughout the city. They've worked tirelessly to create this opportunity, so we're going to be online and also on our television station live, so you'll see the tapes around. This is what we're trying to do as an organization to make sure that when our mobile city hall really gets up and running, that if we needed to have a meeting in another location, it can be done. And that's why we're doing that here tonight. Mr. Morris and his team have worked tirelessly to put together a pretty good packet I can tell you they are probably somewhat nervous and somewhat not, because I've been hounding them for a couple of weeks to make sure we get all the information. But I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Morris and his team. So you got Deputy City Manager Morris will present the rest of the team members that might be speaking. Also, I think there are some growth management and planning staff that are in the audience that will be helping, so he'll introduce them. If you have a particular question or a comment that you want to make, there are comment cards on the back table. Please fill out those cards, and I think if Lynette, she's back there, she will pick them up and bring them to staff, and we will try to answer them within the presentation. So if there's a citizen that has a comment or a question that may not come from our elected officials, please fill out that form, and Lynette will pick it up and bring it to Mr. Morris and the team, and someone will answer it during the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I'm Jim Morris. I'm Deputy City Manager. I serve as the Leader of Growth Management and Planning. I have also practiced law here in land use matters for about 30 years. I'm very, very fortunate to be joined by staff members that I work with. Hannah Ward, immediately to my left, works with us as a planner. She also is someone that grew up in this area. Dennis Mrozik is our planning director, and he does a great job, wonderful person to work with, great person to talk to. Andy Holmes, Assistant City Manager that handles water, sewer, public utilities, roads and streets. Really a guy that seems to know the answer to everything and is never upset by anything, as far as I can tell. So if he is ever upset, I've never known it to be true. And we thank you all for coming tonight. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about area history and just subject matter. So we're going to talk about land planning and regulations. First thing I'm going to say is, who needs it? And the answer to the question is, it all depends. It depends on your population, the available natural resources, quality or the beauty of your location, and the knowledge that you have. I think Florida is a place that shows early in our history, we had plenty of resources, plenty of room, plenty of everything. And we didn't have planning as people came here. Florida was a Spanish territory that became a United States territory, and really the growth of Florida began with it becoming an American territory as people migrated into Florida. And then in 1888, we actually had train service from Florida to New York. In 1895, the FEC Railway began to operate. But the point of it is, it brought people to this area, and people began to see Florida and understand it, all of Florida, not just this area, but this area too. We've been known for the world's most famous beach, and when you look at our beaches, I think you really probably could claim it as the most famous beach when you consider all the things that are named after Daytona. There's Rolex watches that are Rolex Daytonas. There's Ferrari cars that are Ferrari Daytonas. It's a famous place, made famous probably by racing more than the beach, but when you look at the beach itself, what a place it is. It runs north and south. We sit on a lagoon that we call the river. It also runs north and south. All the transportation that came to bring people to us, north and south. And I say that because for so many years we were a north-south community. But we were also a north-south community before Disney came in the early 70s. Orlando and our counties that are inboard to us became busy places, and began to have roads that connected east and west to bring those people to and from the beach. You had hurricane evacuation routes, which caused our roads to go east and west, and a lot of the transportation money that might have been spent for our community to serve ourselves really was spent to connect other people to come to our community. At the same time, Ormond, Port Orange, and New Smyrna were growing westward, where Daytona really went about out to the LPGA, and that was as far west as Daytona went for a long time. The westward growth in Daytona, which is where you see so much of it today, really came as the latest community to do it, not the soonest community to do it. And it's kind of odd when you consider that Daytona, prior to, I'm going to say 75, was really the economic center of the eastern part of Volusia County. And why would that have been? First of all, shopping centers came in the late 60s. Prior to that time, Beach Street was the economic central core of the community. And as other things happened with the roads bringing people further down, the other communities began to get bigger. So those things really began to change how we looked and worked. And then, but through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, Daytona was an economically popular place, and we had service industries, construction, hospitality, railways, retail sales, all strong parts of the economy. Later, GE came and was a part of the community, and they had middle management people here that formed a big part of the economic base of the community. But then things happened consecutively that affected the community. Shopping centers were one that I think eroded the commercial center of Daytona Beach. But in 1963, the FEC Railway had a strike that to this day has never settled. And you had a lot of people here that were employed, that worked in those businesses. They never got their jobs back. In 1968, rail passenger service, which had been in place since the late 1800s, ceased. The FEC quit providing that service, so it stopped a path of north-south transportation that had existed. At the same time, highways had been improved. Old Kings Road, or a form of it, became US 1. It ran down what we know as Ridgewood. And once upon a time, Daytona stopped at US 1, and if you went beyond, you'd gone out into the Ridgewood. Then later, Nova Road became the western boundary of Daytona Beach, and you'd take, I'm from New Smyrna, you'd go around the traffic in Daytona by going down Nova Road to avoid all the busyness in Daytona. Gradually, though, we began to go west. But then you had Disney World in 71. In 78, airlines were deregulated. That affected air service to Daytona and the population that would come to see us. Disney also drew that population away. And I think primarily our visitors were Southeast area visitors as well as Midwest, Indiana, Michigan, those kind of folks. I say that because I lifeguarded for about 5 years, and that's who you saw on the beach the most. But that all had an effect on our community and our economy. Then, in the state level, in the late 70s, Florida began to pass environmental laws. The Growth Management Act, the Florida population was growing. And when you look at the core of Daytona today, or even City Island, if you look at an old picture of City Island, you'll see how small the ballpark was. When Jackie Robinson played there, it was very little more than the sand for the ball field. It's probably 10 times that size now. That's from dredge and fill. It was legal to do that then. Trees weren't preserved, drainage wasn't an issue, you dumped it all in Nova Canal or wherever, and that's what happened. But with the rules that I just mentioned coming into play, planning and development and so on began to be something that needed to be planned for and regulated. As we have grown westward, and we surely have, we've grown westward with rules and regulations that have affected growth and the way that it's handled in a much different way than the way Daytona was originally developed. So we've heard questions and comments about clear cutting and also elevation, because you have clearing in part because it's necessary with the new FEMA rules to bring floors to a certain elevation to meet FEMA standards for flooding. Older houses in the community don't meet those standards if they were below the initial grade. But it's important from a city perspective that we maintain certification with FEMA so that everybody, new houses and old, have FEMA flood insurance, and you have the ability to have your properties insured. Dennis will show you later how we have managed to allow development to occur but still interlink environmental areas, wooded areas, and so on. So that's a part of what we've accomplished by doing those things. Excuse me. The 80s and 90s downturn that I believe existed, and I've lived here all the time that I haven't been in school. The decline in tourism, the loss of the GE folks, which went to Orlando when Martin Marietta merged with Lockheed, and then just the aging of hotel facilities. All those things were aging infrastructure. Meanwhile, in Florida, other parts were really growing rapidly. And it's important to us because we sit at the intersection of two interstates. All of us know that. But when you think about both the economic and population energy that exists in South Florida and Southwest Florida, I think of them almost as volcanoes. And the roads, 95 and I-4, are like the vents in a volcano, bringing that energy towards us. And the energy avoided Daytona for several reasons, I think. One being the county was one of the first places to enact impact fees, and they were county-wide. Other places didn't have that. So you saw Flagler grow quicker with Palm Coast and those developments, and Daytona Beach did. Orlando was feeding off Disney and the economic center that it was. And Daytona properties, particularly out by the interstate, were largely unused. At the same time, though, Consolidated, who had been a landholder here since World War II, began to look at how they managed their property, and they made it to be able to be ready to develop versus leaving it as forests and pastures and so on. And with that, with the growth Southwest and South Florida, everything pushing up the interstates, the thing that I always thought would happen has happened in Daytona, and that is an explosion in growth that has diversified the economy of this community and brought companies like Bieber to basically use Daytona Beach for their worldwide headquarters. It's a German company, has very high pay, and it's a big operation that's going to become bigger and employ more people in Daytona Beach. Brown & Brown is a local company, but The only thing local about it is its origin. It's an international company owned by a man that was born here and his wife who's adopted this place, and they give this community as much energy as they can. They've brought lots and lots of well-paid employees that are diversified and educated. And I think what you have in this community today, Daytona Beach and Volusia County at large, is the opportunity that if you have children that are not yet employed, have the opportunity to be employed and stay here if they wish to be. The downside of that for some people is that the place is different now than it was when they came here. And I've lived here a long time, and I have what I call sometimes the I'm here now rule, which someone would say, I'm here now, nothing should change behind me, ignoring the fact that when they arrive, they actually made changes themselves. I think the place is a better place to be economically and every other way than it was when we were growing up. And I love growing up here, and I love being here, and that's why I'm here now. But what we've done, though, through planning, is that we've found a way to manage the new growth. And Dennis will offer you some comparative photos of the core of the city, which were really developed in an old school way, and the new places which are developed with modern standards. So I think that probably covers what I want to say about our history, because the east-west growth that we've had has been stimulated by growth to the west of us and the road system. And really, we kind of ran out of room from the standpoint of the lagoons and that sort of thing. So that concludes my comments in respect to that. Our next subject is comp plans. It gets a little drier, or maybe it gets better. It depends on your point of view. Florida mandated comprehensive planning, and it's had different evolutionary stages through statutes that have been passed. The big difference that came in Florida planning was when we had a provision called the Consistency Provision. And you'll hear people say, well, the plans are just old, dry things on the shelf. But the fact of the matter is today, as a matter of law, when you adopt land development regulations or when you approve a development, it must be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And there are standards for doing that, but when you look at the comprehensive plan, it really has two primary parts. One is the land use map, which is something we all can look at with colors and land uses designated. And the next is the comprehensive plan policies. Now, there's land use policies. There's also many other subparts of the plan that deal with streets, roads, water, sewer. I'm not going to go into those because they're really infrastructure systems, and you as a commission, the issues that you usually see are land use related. So it's either a land use map or a land use policy. And someone that comes before you with a rezoning request, whether it's for a PD or a simple zoning from R1 to R2, whatever the case might be, that their proposal is evaluated by staff and recommendations made to you based on consistency with the comprehensive plan. And as a matter of law, you're supposed to only adopt development orders, which is the rezoning, that are consistent with the comprehensive plan. And you might say, well, then how does anything get done? It can be done because someone has the opportunity, if they wish, to apply to amend the comprehensive plan as well as the zoning ordinance. And you've seen those too, where you pass a plan amendment, and an item or two later on the agenda, you will see the rezoning that accompanies the comprehensive plan amendment. But the fact is that the commission, when it enacts comprehensive plan amendments or documents, has legislative discretion. What that means is your discretion is very broad, and you have the opportunity to say whether or not you think a policy or a land use designation is appropriate based on a broader view that you may have of what's good or bad for the community. When the comp plan document is adopted, your discretion actually narrows when you come to a rezoning. The rezoning actually becomes a quasi-judicial proceeding. And essentially what that means is you're supposed to act to a certain degree like a court, applying standards to determine whether or not the rezoning is consistent with the comp plan that you may have just adopted, and just whether it fits within those standards. But you don't have quite the same breadth of discretion in a rezoning that you have in a comp plan amendment. Likewise, if you have someone come in, their property zoned residential, or let's make it commercial, and you're really not too happy that it's a commercial proposal that they have, that their application is consistent with the comp plan, you really have to examine that rezoning from the standpoint of whether it fits in the comp plan, and from a quasi-judicial perspective, should you adopt that amendment. So the discretion changed a little bit, and you're acting in two capacities depending upon whether it's an amendment where you are a legislative body, amendment to the plan, whether it's a rezoning where you're a quasi-judicial body. Even though it's the same people, you have different legal positions when that goes through. The other thing that is a part of the comp plan that's so important is a concurrency provision. And concurrency is effectively meant to say that you're proposing a development. We know it has certain demand for water, sewer, traffic, recreation, different things. And you look at concurrency to see whether or not there are supplies concurrently available to meet the demands from that particular development. The greatest and most significant thing that you've seen in concurrency is proportionate share agreements that have been paid to the county and to the city to accomplish road improvements that will be helpful to the community and impact the traffic, or rather mitigate the traffic that comes from that particular development. In the case of the Williamson extension from LPGA towards State Road 40, the majority of that money was county, but it was generated by developments within Daytona Beach. $14 million was assembled from developments in that area, and the county expended that money pursuant to its agreement with the city to expand Williamson and make it a 4-lane road and make it a safer road. It's also a belt road on the western side of our city. Buc-ee's, on the other hand, paid for improvements, spent roughly $4 million to make an interchange improvements and so on to associate with their traffic. Minto has built a portion of a thoroughfare road to connect to State Road 40, which will give us a parallel road to 95 west of 95. And that's important if there's trouble on 95 and those sort of things. So development, not only in roads, but in other things, is caused to pay its way. And the impression that the city is spending general fund money to pay for those developments, if people have that impression, and I've been told some do, is a misimpression. That isn't the case. As a commission, with the planning policies that you have and the evaluation that you receive, it's our job to bring something to you that you're not expending general fund money to accomplish someone else's development plan. They have to pay for it themselves. I think I've really covered the comp plan and rezoning. I know Dennis has got a number of comments that he would like to make, and I'll take a seat, and we can certainly answer questions at the end, or mayor and commission members, if you have questions in between, we will certainly take your questions as they come up. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Dennis Mrozek, Planning Director with the City of Daytona Beach. Anybody recognize that picture? That was taken by Louis Garcia last year. It is the new city park that's over there, just adjacent to LPGA, south of Tournament. You'll see the city park right up front. LPGA development is over on the left-hand side. That's Perfect Drive. You can kind of see the golf course a little bit further back. Over on the right-hand side, you see Bayberry, and then behind that, Mosaic. So you see a lot of the development that's occurring out in that area. I just thought that was a fantastic picture. I wanted to get that up there. In 2014, Florida passed New York as the 3rd most populous state in the country. Let's see if I can get this to work. There you go. People have been making Florida their home for quite a long time. They love Florida, and we just don't see it slowing down anytime soon. We've got a lot of people moving to Florida. These are headlines that I pulled within the past couple of weeks. Florida has the top 3 cities, top 3 out of 9 in the country for professionals and where they want to relocate to. So we're seeing a lot of people come down here to Florida, which is a great thing. Together some populations. This is the Florida population dating back to 1930. You'll see it's a pretty steady rise as you go across every 10 years. There's a nice gradual increase, big increase, but it's a nice gradual increase throughout the state of Florida. Volusia County, you kind of see the same kind of growth pattern. Hiccup there, here or there, but you still see some great growth. Daytona Beach. This is Daytona Beach from 1930 to the year 2020. Population started to flatten out a little bit in between 1990 and the year 2000. Only 2,000 people. From 2000 to 2010, Daytona Beach actually saw a decrease in population of approximately 3,000 people, which is kind of interesting when you take a look at the state of Florida and Volusia County. They were in losing population, but over here in Daytona Beach, we did. Since then, I think we've recorrected pretty well, recalibrated our numbers, and now we're heading in a direction where we were on the path before that little hiccup that we had. I should point out also where we declined a little bit over the decade, the state of Florida actually showed a decline in population between 2008 and 2009. So that was pretty interesting. It was the first time that Florida actually declined in population since World War II. So declines in population in cities, they don't usually go over very well. It's not a good sign for a city that's developing. There you go. Thank you. All right, so I wanted to provide a couple of planning terms. I know we use a lot of different planning terms when we speak, and I just wanted to clarify what some of them meant and what it actually looks like with those planning terms. When we look at density, density is always a measurement of residential intensity. So density is a ratio, so it's the units per acre is really what it works out to. We've got zoning designations. Some of the lower ones, level 1 residential would allow 8 dwelling units an acre, level 2 would allow up to 20, level 3 would allow up to 40 dwelling units an acre. The picture you see there, that's the framework multifamily. That's over on Beach Street. That was approved with 110 dwelling units an acre. That is probably the most dwelling units we have approved in one location here in the city of Daytona Beach, and it is absolutely appropriate for that location. We have a nice, dense piece of property. We've got people who are going to be living there. They're going to be walking to the downtown area. They're going to be taking advantage of the park. They're going to be able to walk to work. It's a concentration of people we're bringing into the downtown area that will just help build the downtown area. So things like this are exciting. When we look at other densities, typically when you look at the other side of the city, LPGA, where we see some multifamily developments, you're usually looking around 20 dwelling units an acre for a typical multifamily development. That's usually what we're seeing. The cottages, if you're all familiar with the cottages, are kind of single units. They almost look like single family. That density is approximately 9 dwelling units an acre. So even less than what you might find with a multifamily. Although we call it multifamily, it is less density associated with that. And then another one I wanted to bring up, the INA group development that was approved recently by the City Commission. This is the one that's near the water treatment facility, near the stadium. Dunn Avenue will be going through it. That development was approved with 344 units. They had a density of 1.5 dwelling units an acre. They were able to preserve and conserve a great deal of the property they had because they were able to cluster a lot of the development that they had on that site. So that's a great project for that location. So while density measures residential intensity, area ratio measures non-residential density. You'll hear all the time we'll talk about a maximum floor area ratio of 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. Sometimes we'll call it a FAR, sometimes we'll call it the FAR. That middle row, I think, is a pretty good indication of how I can explain the way a floor area ratio looks. If that first square was a 10,000 square foot building and it was sitting on a 10,000 square foot lot, the floor area ratio for that building would be 1.0. It is, I think it's come from there. It is all building and all lot. Now, nobody's going to develop from property line to property line, but that's an example of a 1.0. Also, though, the slide next to it where you see there's 2 stories, half of the property is being used. Each story, if the lot were 10,000 square feet, if each story were 5,000 square feet, that also would have a floor area ratio of 1.0. So they're going up, but they're using less space. The final one, the 4-story, also that is a density, that is a floor area ratio of 1.0. So when you think about floor area ratio, you can think if they go up, they can use some of that floor area ratio, which is good because it helps protect the area that they're developing. We're always looking how to protect the environmental area with the built environment that we have. Okay, as planners, we recognize the 10 accepted principles that define the smart growth. This is reflected in what we do at work, but it's also reflected in our land development code. We have a lot of these. Most of these are in our land development code in one way or another. I just want to kind of run through a couple of those real quick. We look for, and I should say, we try to use all of these. There's some projects you just can't use all of these techniques. Some projects are just too small. But one of the things we try to do is if we have multiple small projects in the same area, we make that almost act as if it's a larger development, and we try to use all of these principles around that. So mix of land uses, that's always important. The easiest way to explain that is if we're in a 2-square block area, and in that block area, I got a place to live, I got a place to work, I got a place to go to school, I got a place to shop, got a place to go to the park. I'm staying in that area. That's where I'm going to be spending most of my time. It's going to put less people on the road. They don't have to travel down the road to go to the grocery store. They don't have to travel down the road to go to the store or to the school. They stay right there in their area, and that's good for the community because it keeps people tight. The next one, take advantage of compact building design. Again, just as I was talking with INA, the closer we get these buildings together, the higher we can go with these buildings, the more of the environmental area we can protect and save. And that's always important. Creating a range of housing opportunities and choices. Always good to have a mix of housing types. You want to have single-family homes, duplex. You want to have different sizes. You want to have your multifamily. You want to have accessory dwelling units, something that we just recently added. So we want to have a good mix of these types of buildings, these types of residential units. We want to create walkable neighborhoods. This is especially important in Florida. Florida was kind of designed late in the game, and it was really designed to the automobile. So you're going to find a lot of places that don't have sidewalks. I think the city right now is doing a very good job of going back in areas where sidewalks weren't installed, and we're going back and we're installing those sidewalks now. This allows an additional mode of transportation to get people back and forth safely, and that's really important. Fostering distinctive, attractive communities with a strong sense of place. We've got design standards in our land development code. We follow those design standards. This helps lift the design we have of our building, and it does bring some pride to the community. Preserve open spaces, farmland, that's more for rural areas, natural beauty, and critical environmental areas. This is about respecting the natural environment while still developing in the built environment. This is something we do on a regular basis. The first thing you do is you take a look at the natural environment and how can we build or what can be done to have a development in this place. Just a few more. Strengthen and direct development towards existing communities. We look toward infill development. We also have requirements for established urban service boundaries. So we're kind of limited on how far we can go out. As a city, we really are kind of limited. And I'm going to do a couple of slides later on that's going to show you a little bit of that. Provide a variety of transportation choices. VOTRAN controls the buses, and there's only so much we can do. But what we can do is when we have a development come in, we make sure they have a bus stop there. If they have a bus stop there, then it gives them the opportunity to use that bus stop. Also sidewalks and bikes. We want to be able to this multimodal, allow different opportunities for people to walk someplace where maybe you don't have those opportunities to walk now. And then, let's see, make development decisions that are predictable, fair, and cost-effective. This is done with a strong land development code. Our comprehensive plan and our strong land development code. When somebody comes in here and they want to develop, that's the rule book. They look at the rule book and they say, this is what I have to do. And we say, yep, as long as you follow those rules, this is what you're going to be able to do. Encourage community stakeholders, collaboration, and development decisions. With the new land development code, we brought in neighborhood meetings. We didn't used to do these neighborhood meetings. This is something we brought in. Get into the neighborhood, talk to the community, see what it is they like. Let's put that into the plan. Let's mix things up a little bit and see how we can make them happy. Just recently, we changed our land development code to require notices for public hearings at the planning board. Before, it wasn't a requirement. Now we're putting it out there. The public is invited to come to those planning board meetings, and they are invited to speak. The planning board listens to them. Planning board is a very active group. They love talking. They love talking to the residents. They love talking to each other. They love talking to developers and to staff. So come on out there, and the planning board will be more than happy to talk to you. So speaking of the planning board, I want to talk about some of the roles of the planning board real quickly. You know, planning board is not only necessary for resident involvement, and in residents I mean the planning board members are residents. They are members of the community who are looking at these projects coming in. They're taking staff's advice or staff's questions, and they're saying, okay, is this right for the community? They're the first stop, well, I should say second stop, staff would be the first stop, but they're the stop right before it gets to the city commission. So they're doing a lot of work and a lot of questions asking why. Why is this like this? How come we didn't do this? Things they like, things they don't like. And there's a good conversations that go back and forth with the planning board. The planning board does act as the city's local planning agency in accordance with state law. We are required to have the planning board, our local planning agency. They assume responsibility for compliance with the city's comprehensive plan. Everything we do has to be in compliance with the comprehensive plan. They review site plans that are greater than 20,000 square feet for approval. So whenever we have a site plan that comes in, it goes to the planning board. They look at the project, and we have discussions about it, and they do the approval. Something, you know, it's kind of a spot. If they meet all of their code requirements, you can't really say no, but what kind of conversation happens after that is, well, I didn't like this part of it. Maybe we need to do an LDC text amendment to change this so that doesn't happen again. And then we start that process of how we can do something like that. Make recommendations to the city commission. They are an advisory board, so they do make recommendations to the city commissions on applications for development permits, including text amendments, comprehensive plan amendments, zoning, PDs, preliminary plats, and public, semi-public, and special uses. The public, again, is always encouraged to go to the planning board, and they can have they have an opportunity to speak at the planning board. So if they have something to say, if you like the project, I would encourage you to come on out. Typically, if you don't like the project, is usually when we see people coming out, but if you do like the project, I encourage people to come on out and say that as well, because then we can have more of those projects come in the city. You know, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to bring Hannah in. Hannah's our senior planner. Hannah's going to review the application, the TRT application review process. So she's going to step in, and she's going to awe you with what she can do.
Good evening, commission members. I'm Hannah Ward. As Dennis said, I'm a senior planner with the city. I also help to coordinate the city's technical review team. They are responsible for reviewing the development review application process. The technical review team is made up of 16 members of city staff. They represent multiple different departments throughout the city, and they are responsible for reviewing the following categories. These review responsibilities are shared by the 16 members, and it's represented by planning review, which includes reviewing design standards, development standards, including parking, location of landscaping, zoning, which would include uses and the locations of those uses within the city, landscaping, as I discussed, engineering, which would include roadway design, engineering of the site, topography, you know, whether or not it's in the flood zone, traffic, obviously traffic counts, analysis of the impacts of development, utilities, fire, redevelopment would review, what if a site is located within a redevelopment area, surveying, and addressing. So this is a kind of a flow chart of the major components of the development review application process and how the technical review team gets involved. It's typically initiated with a pre-application meeting staff conference, or what people commonly call the technical review team meeting. The general purpose of those meetings is to provide applicants with the opportunity to determine the submittal requirements and procedures and standards that would be applicable to a specific type of application that would be submitted. It also provides city staff an opportunity to become familiar with the project, to provide preliminary comments regarding the scope of the project, the features, impacts, and all of those as in relation to code requirements. I've identified up here some of the applications that do require the pre-application staff conference. That includes comprehensive plan amendments, rezonings, which would include rezonings to city zoning designations, plan development rezonings, or even historic overlay zoning designations, special use permits, public or semi-public use permits, and land development code text amendments. We also provide the opportunity for individuals to schedule pre-application meetings as a courtesy for other types of applications, whether or not they require that. That would include site plans, which typically don't require the pre-application meeting, but it is often a benefit to individuals seeking to develop within the city to have that meeting with staff to kind of understand what will be required of them as they move through the process. So we hold these meetings, the pre-application meetings, we hold them every Tuesday. We schedule appointments from 9 to noon. Currently, those meetings are being held virtually. It's worked really well for us, as you know, COVID has been an issue, and we are pretty much booked every week with those application or meetings. The second step in the process that oftentimes applications will be required to demonstrate compliance with is neighborhood meetings. As Dennis said, that was implemented when the new code was brought into effect in 2015, and it provides an additional layer of transparency in the review process that allows for neighbors to become aware of what's going on, or anybody who would be interested in finding out more information about applications that are being submitted. So neighborhood meetings are required for comprehensive plan amendments, special use permits, public and semi-public use permits, and also rezonings that would include plan developments, rezonings to city zoning designations, or historic or overlay zoning designations. These neighborhood meetings are required to occur 21 days prior to an item being scheduled for an advisory or decision-making hearing, but they can occur anytime after the pre-application meeting, even if they have not submitted an application to the city for review. Right. A little bit about the requirements and procedures in the Land Development Code that provide standards for what needs to be submitted to the city and the noticing that's provided to people in the community. So 10 days in advance of the meeting, applicants are required to provide a mailed notice to property owners within 300 feet of the land subject to the application. They are also required to provide that notice to city staff. These are all requirements I wanted to point out that are required to be fulfilled by the applicant, and that information is summarized and provided to city staff in advance of their scheduled hearings to make sure that they've met the requirements. They're also required to do a posted notice of the meeting 10 days advance of the meeting. I provide an example of the sign that they're required to post, and they're required to post that notice on any of the right-of-ways abutting the property, and that notice is required to be visible from the right-of-ways abutting that property. Then the applicant is also required to hold the meeting in a location that is convenient and accessible to neighbors residing in close proximity to the site subject to the application, and it's required to be scheduled at 6 p.m. on a weekday to provide neighbors or anybody from the public who's interested in the application the opportunity to come hear the discussion. As I said before, a summary of the neighborhood meeting is required to be provided to city staff, and that information is typically included in the staff reports that are provided to the advisory board as well as the decision-making boards. The next step in the process is the application submittal and acceptance. I just wanted to be clear that sometimes we have applicants go through the pre-application staff conference, maybe sometimes they'll even have their neighborhood meeting, but they won't proceed to doing the actual application submittal and acceptance. These are all kind of steps in the process of one leads to the next. So with regards to the application submittal, once we receive those applications, they are placed in a review cycle. We have a review cycle that begins every Thursday at noon, so applications submitted by that time get placed into a review cycle, and that kind of initiates the staff review of the project. So within 5 business days of us receiving the application, we're required to review it to make sure all of the documents that are necessary for review have been provided, all the associated fees, and the formatting of the application is correct. Once we've been able to review that for completeness and determine that it can proceed to the staff review, then that kind of initiates the cycle where the technical review team gets involved. If the application is incomplete for missing documents or missing formatting or application fees, the applicant is also provided that information either via email or phone call and notified so that they can provide us the complete information to initiate that process. Once we receive a complete application is when the process for staff review gets initiated. We do try to work with applicants on, because sometimes we'll receive parts of the documents and not. We try to work with them to make sure that they're remaining on the schedule they anticipate for their project. But we do have a large volume of projects that come through, so we just try to make sure that this stuff is happening in a consistent manner and that we're providing fair treatment to everyone who's submitting applications. So with regard to the staff review process, I wanted to kind of highlight the average timelines for review, and this is the information that we provide to individuals in the pre-application meeting. So typically I would say on a general application, right now we're in about a 2 to 3 week review cycle. Oftentimes applications will go through 3 to 4 rounds of review prior to all outstanding comments being resolved, and we say about 4 to 6 months from approval average, but that timeline may be shortened or lengthened based on the quality of the submittals and how quickly the applicant responds to staff comments. The average review timelines kind of bend and flex based on the volume of the projects, but we do try to keep that at between 2 and 3 week review cycles so people can anticipate information being provided to them. When this happens, I basically compile the review from all of the 16 members of the technical review team, and that document with the complete review from all members is provided for comment and review by the applicant, and then they have to submit the information back to us with all of the supporting information and revisions until all outstanding comments are resolved. Once that occurs, then we begin scheduling for the advisory hearings or the decision-making hearings. So I wanted to kind of show you all the general notice schedule that we provide to applicants with their development review application packet. If you look at the far left column that's been highlighted, that identifies to applicants when their outstanding comments have to be resolved in order to proceed to the public hearings. So we don't schedule any applications for public hearings until all outstanding comments are resolved, and that is required to occur at least 30 days prior to the scheduled hearing date that they are intending to appear on. And then obviously the planning board and city commission dates based on the type of application are outlined for them based on the timelines that are required for us to prepare our agenda packages. So I wanted to go back to the previous slide. If a staff report is warranted and the application is going to be heard by an advisory board or a decision-making board, the staff report is required to conclude whether or not the application complies with the Land Development Code review standards for each application type. So we basically do an analysis of the review standards associated with each application, and that's provided to support whether or not our staff recommendation of the project and whether or not it's complying with the standards. The staff report may also identify compliance deficiencies and how these may be corrected or how adverse impacts may be mitigated with regard to a project. Did you have a question? Okay. And so we do have 2 different routes that the applications go. They either require a staff decision, which would be an administrative approval of a project, or they are heard by the advisory boards or the decision-making board. And so I highlighted kind of the different routes that we kind of see with regard to approvals. It'll be either a flat approval with conditions, and then or a denial of the application because it's not meeting the standards identified. All right. So I just wanted to identify this again. We do have a packet that's provided to applicants when they go to submit their application. This is provided to them in the pre-application meeting staff conference. It's about 18 pages long, but it includes this general notice schedule. It includes contact numbers and emails for all city staff members that are associated with the technical review team, and then it provides detailed information regarding our process and submittal requirements and the expectations as they move through the process with regard to the different components of the review and the requirements that they need to follow. Sure.
Testing. If an applicant is denied, what's the process? Do they have to start over, or they need to go back and do what they should have done?
So there is an appeal process in our land development code. So they do have the opportunity to appeal based on what the application is being denied for. And the land development code identifies different reviewing bodies that would then review the appeal process.
Let me just clarify one thing. There are several types of decisions, such as variances, for which there are no appeal. There's a general provision in Section 3.3 of the Land Development Code that does contain a restriction on reapplication within a 6-month period after denial, and that would extend to after appeal is upheld, unless the application changes significantly or the facts change significantly.
And I actually haven't dealt with too many appeals. So when we do have those requests come through, we have to kind of take a look at the standards in the land development code and see which route it's required to follow with regard to that appeal process. You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay. So then the last part of the process is obviously when the application moves to the advisory body review and then the decision-making body review and recommendation or final decision-making. So I just kind of wanted to highlight, I put a table up here to highlight some of the more common applications and how those are reviewed. So for example, rezonings, they're required to be heard by an advisory body. So if that's located within a redevelopment area or for, say, a historic overlay zoning designation, the advisory body, kind of the flow of that would be, they would need to be heard by the historic board, then the redevelopment board associated with that redevelopment area, then the planning board, then the city commission. So sometimes applications will have multiple layers of public hearings prior to you all being able to hear the project. So I kind of just wanted to simplify that table for you all to kind of show the more common applications and how those are heard. With regard to site plans, anything under 20,000 square feet would be an administrative approval of a site plan. Anything exceeding 20,000 square feet is heard by the planning board for approval. If it's in a redevelopment area, it's heard by the redevelopment board for approval. Any industrial development adjacent to residential areas exceeding 20,000 square feet would also be required to be heard by the planning board or the redevelopment board for that area. And then if an industrial development exceeds 20,000 square feet, but it is not located adjacent to any residential, that is a staff approval of that type of project. And this concludes my presentation, but if you all have any questions, I'm here to answer anything. You're welcome.
Okay. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions as I do this, just stop me and we can kind of go over that. All right, so, fire, there you go. How's that, better? Okay. So traffic is heavy. Traffic is terrible today. It's unbelievable. Traffic is light today. All subjective. You know, something that's heavy in traffic for one person may not necessarily be heavy in traffic for another person. You know, I'm from Chicago. I first moved down to Florida. I was like, it's not so bad. Yeah, then after a while, you know, you kind of get into it and you're like, okay, maybe it can be a little bit bad. So the question is, how do we quantify how much traffic is an acceptable level of traffic? So I've got a couple more common planning terms for you. So we look at level of service. This is a quantified indicator of level of service that is or will be provided by an infrastructure system. Now, these numbers are out of our comprehensive plan. So a limited service highway, so I-95, has a level of service C. Primary arterials Things like Clyde Morris, Williamson, LPJ, Bevel. Level of service D. Minor arterials and collectors, these are the local streets, subdivisions. These have a level of service E. So what does that mean? I've got this little chart here to give you an idea. The higher the number, the further you get into the alphabet. Okay, good. Thank you. The further you get into the alphabet, the more heavy the traffic is. However, it could still meet the requirements of our comprehensive plan to say, you know what, this is an acceptable level that we have in our comprehensive plan for this particular road. So what I want to do is kind of go through a little bit, and I don't have it up there, but I'm going to go through a little bit about how we look at a traffic review when it comes in and what we review it for. And Sands may be laughing at me because I'm not a traffic engineer, so I'm going to do my best. First thing I want to say, it all starts with we follow the River to Sea TPO guidelines. This is what we follow for all submittals for doing our determination of, for a traffic methodology as well as the traffic impact analysis. So it starts with a submittal of a traffic memorandum. In a traffic memorandum, it's going to say, this is my use, this is how big the use is, this is where it's located, and then the determination is made, do they need to go through a full traffic impact analysis process? In most cases, they do. So the next step is traffic methodology needs to be submitted. This is a collaborative effort with city staff, really city staff consultants, and the county, and sometimes the state. So they get together and they say, okay, let's take a look at your project in this methodology. What are you going to look at in your TIA? We're going to look at access to your property. We're going to look at where the traffic is going to go once they leave there. How much traffic are they going to generate? Are they going to go far down that street? 60% of the traffic going this way, 30% of traffic going this way? All of that gets calculated out. They also look at intersections. How are they going to impact the intersections? If people are going to be turning one way, they use all of these calculations to determine this one piece of property will affect traffic in this entire area. And they say, okay, these are the areas you need to look at. So once we agree on that traffic methodology, the applicant comes forward with his traffic impact analysis based on that traffic methodology. Goes to staff, goes to our consultant, goes to the county, to the state. They review it. They look at it and say, okay, well, you know what, this segment over here between Williamson and Clyde Morris, we need to make a change over here, and you need to address that a little bit more. So they go through this. That happens a couple of times. They identify areas, streets, segments, intersections that need improvements. And if they need improvements, they get marked on there, and they say, okay, because you're not meeting your level of service, we're going to have to increase the level of service on this roadway system. We're going to have to put in an extra lane, and it's going to cost X amount of dollars. So that they put that together, and that comes to our total of the proportionate fair share. What is that dollar amount? What is their share of making those improvements to increase the capacity on that roadway? So we review that. Proportionate fair shares go to the city commission for approval. They go to the county council for approval, and then they go back to us with a receipt of a check. We do not approve a site plan. We do not approve a plat for a single-family development until payment has been made. We need to see a receipt of the payment, and most of the time the payment goes to the county because we're dealing with a lot of county roads. But we have to see the receipt paid, that they made their payment for the prop share that was designated for their development. Here is a list of the prop shares that have been approved since 2016, I believe. 2016. Of all the prop shares that were approved, you see we got a total over there of just over 26 million. Just want to add a couple of things on here. You'll see the Minto, the very first one, Minto parcel, Minto B latitudes, it says improvements. In lieu of paying the proportionate fair share, they actually constructed all of the improvements, the street improvements that were going to be necessary for them to reach to have the capacity that they needed on that roadway system. They did those improvements. And I can't recall what that was, the number was. I'm going to guess at that time maybe it was about 4 or 5 million, maybe a little bit more. So that's not in that 26 million. The other one is Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's decided that they're not going to do the prop share, they were going to do the improvements. When you saw the widening of the overpass from the 2 to 3 lanes, that was all Buc-ee's making those improvements. When you saw the turn lanes over at Williamson, that was Buc-ee's making those improvements. They improved it, everything from the west side of 95 from these off-ramps all the way up to Williamson Road. They were making the improvements on the street to meet the capacity requirements for their development. They even had to extend lanes on, excuse me, on 95 on the off-ramps. They extended those lanes because they knew that they were going to be providing additional traffic. So that was those were the prop share numbers. Now, there's things that staff can do, and we do them on a regular basis. Just building a road is one thing, and that's a great thing to get a road built. But there are other things that we can do as staff, and we have in our land development code ways that we can help mitigate some of the traffic impacts. Well, first thing we do is we work closely with the county. We have the county staff sit in our TRT meetings. We work with them on a regular basis. We have a great relationship with them. And so that really helps us move these processes along. We require cross-access between adjoining developments. This is important because it stops cars from going onto the road to get to the property next to it. I always say my biggest pet peeve that we have in this city, and we almost had a chance to fix it and we didn't, was between Dick's Sporting Goods and Big Lots. If you're over at Dick's Sporting Goods, you got to go out onto ISB, you got to make a left, you got to go back to Williamson, you got to turn around, you got to come in to get to the lot next door. The way development like this should occur, it should all be done internally. If it's done internally, you're not putting any of those cars out onto the road. Limit the number of access points on the street. When you limit the number of access points, you allow traffic to flow freer. I think you'll find this if you drive down Mason, there's people turning all the time. You get behind somebody, he's making a turn. As you're waiting for him to make a turn, somebody else pulls in front of him, he slows down, he makes a turn. That really slows down traffic. So what we try to do is limit those access points so we don't have those conflicts over there. Also, we always try to focus on pedestrian safety and access. We keep pedestrians away from the vehicles as much as we possibly can. Then we also provide the extra sidewalks in case somebody doesn't want to drive. They have the opportunity to walk or take their bicycle. That's always an opportunity to them. One more thing that's not on there, and something we do during our development process, and we've done it in a lot of projects, we take a look at the opportunity to add city roads where they don't exist that will connect to other city roads. We've seen this in places like O'Connor Capital. We worked with the developer to have a spine road that goes from LPGA all the way up the Strickland Range Road, where they can get to the hospital to the north of it without going on to Williamson, without going on to LPGA. Those things are all very good for keeping traffic off the road, very necessary part of the review process. And we do that on a regular basis. Project Oasis was great at that because they were able to interconnect a lot of roads that keeps people off of some of those major roads where we're seeing a lot of that traffic. You know what? I'm going to have Andy talk a little bit about water. Since we're talking about traffic, he can kind of talk a little bit about water as well. So.
Thanks, Dennis. I'm Andy Holmes, Assistant City Manager, and I want to talk to you a little bit about water and sewer. This will be quick. I know it's a fascinating subject for us engineers, but I recognize that it might not be as fascinating for you. So I'm going to give you the highlights. When a development comes in, any kind of a development project comes in to TRT, the process that Hannah talked about, one of the things that we ask for is sewer and water demand. And they have to justify that, so we have to know the use and the size of the use and the intensity. And then we can verify the sewer and water demand. Once we have that information, we do a capacity evaluation of our system in the area and our treatment. Once that's done, and Daytona Beach enjoys a healthy cushion of capacity, we try to maintain 3 to 5 years of capacity ahead so that we don't get in a bind with not having enough capacity in either our water or sewer system. But at building permit, when they come in for the building permit and pay the impact fees for water and sewer, then that capacity is reserved for that development. but not until. As Dennis said about traffic, it's reserved when the fee is paid, but not until the fee is paid. As I said, we have a healthy cushion of capacity in Daytona Beach, about 3 to 5 years, and we work very hard to maintain and increase that capacity as necessary. The projects to increase that take a long time. They're very expensive, so we have to start those projects 3-5 years ahead of time at least, and so we do that. There's 3 kinds of capacities that we have to maintain. I'll just mention this. It's kind of interesting to me. The regulatory capacity, which is you hear us talk about the CUP. When we talk about projects, that's a consumptive use permit. That's the regulation by the Water Management District of how much water we can draw out of the ground. So that's a regulatory limit for us. Our treatment capacity is different from that. Our treatment capacity right now for water is about 24 million gallons a day. Our CUP, or our permitted withdrawal, is 16 million gallons a day. And so we're actually in the early stages right now of beginning to increase that consumptive use permit level so that we can maintain that comfortable 3 to 5 year cushion against upcoming development. So, and then the last type of capacity is in our distribution system for water or our collection system for sewer. Make sure we have enough of the right size pipes in the ground in the right places to distribute the water that we treat and to collect the sewage that is produced as a result. Be happy to take any questions from you at any time.
I have a question. How does it feel to say Assistant City Manager?
I'm happy to serve. As I said, you know, it's a balance between helping to find resources so the people that actually do the work can get it done, and then staying out of their way so they can do it.
Okay. I wanted to talk briefly about tree preservation. Tree preservation and open space, in some of our land development code requirements, at least 15% of a development site is required to be occupied by trees. It's a minimum requirement occupied by trees. Minimum preservation of existing tree canopy. So we've got those minimums. There are minimum tree, specimen tree preservation requirements. Specimen trees are trees that are 12 inches or greater. We have to review that when we review landscape plans and surveys. And then, of course, the preservation of all historic trees, any live oaks or bald cypress that are over 36 inches in DBH, those require a city commission for approval. So if any of those come down, they're going to come before you. Unless they're damaged and we get something from an arborist saying that they're damaged or dangerous, they'll be coming to the city commission for approval to remove. I wanted to do this. I had somebody come up to me and they were talking about clear cutting, and somebody made a comment about Minto, Mosaic. This is Latitudes, and they made a comment about clear cutting out there at the development site. This is probably about a year old, so there's still some development going on over there. But if you take a look at that, you're going to see all of the development that's occurring out there. And a lot of people do see that. They'll see that development. But what I wanted to do is show you the area that wasn't being developed. Now, I took just kind of the half of the property instead of doing the whole thing, just to give you an example of what we're looking at. So what you're going to see is the areas that are actually treed areas that have been protected. They're large groupings of trees, which is the best way to do this. That's what you want to do. You don't want to save a tree here or a tree there. You want to save a large grouping of trees because it creates a better habitat for the environment. So here's an example of how they actually use the scalpel to kind of put the development in and still protect the trees that were already out there. So that's a really good example. How good of an example is it? So this is their numbers. Take a look on the bottom there. This is out of 1,500 acres, 435 are conservation area and open space. That's a large area that's being set aside as open space and conservation area. So nearly a third of the property. So it's pretty impressive. And this is the way we plan now. When you take a look at maybe some of the old Daytona Beach, These planning techniques weren't in place. They were just clearing things down and they were putting in houses and streets. When we plan now, we take a look at what the actual environment is and how we can put a built environment with the natural environment and make it all work together. This has been going on for a while. For years we've been doing this. Yeah, so we don't clear cut. That's not a thing. If you see a property that has 0 trees, typically it probably didn't have trees on there before, or the trees were just so damaged that they had to come down. And then there's replacement tree requirements that they still have to meet minimum when they put them back, that they have to have a minimum number of trees. I want to get into a little bit of construction, and I'm going to kind of fly through a couple things. I've got this from P&L. They wanted to show us how many single-family, multifamily, and commercial buildings that they have been approving, COing over the past few years. Single-family in 2019, 567, 2020, 543, and I had a good year last year, very busy, 736, and they're probably on pace to do at least 736 again this year or something maybe a little bit greater than that. Multifamily, total number of units, 2019, 444, then 699 and 678, and right now they've got on pace, they've got 429, probably on pace for somewhere around 600 by the end of the year. Commercial buildings, you see them over there. This will include all of the restaurants, hotels, things like that. A large block of this number are actually garages that are associated with some multifamily developments. I do have the complete list in your book if you wanted to take a look at that. When Hannah was talking about development projects, these are development projects that, applications that come into the planning staff. You'll see over the last 10 years where we are. This year, we're actually on pace to do somewhere more than the 171, probably closer to 200. And then I kind of broke it down also, site plan, platting, or rezoning, and comp plan. See site plans kind of tailed off a little bit. Rezoning up and down, and quite a few comprehensive plans. I should point out, not every application that comes into the planning department gets approved. There's a lot of time where it won't make it out of the staff for whatever reason, or the applicant will withdraw it. And so these are the applications that all come in. What ends up on the other side might be a little bit different. Now, the last growth management meeting we had, we were doing all of the development that was west of 95. You got a question? Sure.
Approximately how many applications do you turn down in a year, say?
We don't.
How many you get turned in?
Yeah, we don't turn down any applications. Somebody wants to make an application to the city, everybody is entitled to submit an application. What we'll do is when we get the application in, we're going to review it for the merits of the application. So we'll go through it, and as Hannah was talking, we'll make a bunch of comments. If it's a poor application, there's going to be a lot of comments on there. You're not meeting this code requirement, that code requirement. This is not consistent with the comprehensive plan, and we provide them the list. A lot of times, if we've got somebody coming in and they're not familiar with the process, they see that list, and it gets very daunting for somebody who is not used to this process to go through that. Now, we'll do everything we can to help them. There's sometimes we can't do it for them, though. We can't do the project and correct it and then have them submit it to us for us to review. We always encourage them to use a professional that who does this that might be able to help them through the process. So we personally don't reject an application. We'll take it in and still review it.
So eventually, every permit will get approved if they go back and do
And fix
everything they're
everything.
supposed to.
Yeah, there's a potential for that, yeah. As long as they meet all of the code requirements, there's a potential that all of those applications, because we have a contract with them. Follow our land development code, follow our comprehensive plan, and you can get an approved project. And as long as they do that, then we should be good.
I just want to add something. The comprehensive plan and land development code are limitations on property rights. They can't be designed to prohibit all development, because then we have to pay somebody for their property. They can't be designed to unreasonably burden individual properties, because under the Burt-Harris Act, we still have to pay them those damages. In fact, this year, Governor DeSantis vetoed a bill that the legislature passed that would have required local governments to pay businesses damages for any regulation adopted that would reduce their revenue by 15%. So we have to have rules that do allow people to develop their property if all the boxes are checked.
Okay, as I was saying, last growth management, I did all of the activity that was really going on west of 95. I wanted to give a snapshot of a couple areas in the city. So this is going to be north of 95 along LPGA. And I'll run through this quickly because you know a lot of these things that are going on. And I broke these down in quadrants. So up on the top is, we're going to take a look at that area first. That's north of Strickland Range Road between 95 and Williamson. So with that, we've got the Williamson Hand PD that was recently approved, and actually the site plan is under construction right now. That's approximately 300 units. Right below that, you see the Hallmark Heritage First United Methodist Church. That was approved as a couple of PDs. Did we get a site plan on that yet? We have a plat and a site plan in staff review right now for that. The Napier Apartments, they've got their first phase completed. The second phase is under construction. Lago Verde, this is something that was approved in February of 2020. We've seen no activity from Lago Verde. They haven't come in and talked to us at all. All right, so Quadrant B, this is the O'Connor Capital, so between 95 and Clyde Morris, north of LPJ, south of Strickland. So we got the O'Connor Capital, really is kind of like the C all the way around the building. It's 214 acres. We just platted that. Went through the platting process, but there's a lot of uses that could be permitted over there. This is the development that we worked with the developer to have a road that goes along 95 to get to the north. That's very important for traffic in that area. That's where the cottages is located. Cottages are complete or nearly complete now. Daytona VA is under construction. Hopefully they'll be done within the next year and a half. And then you see the Buc-ee's PD right there in the corner. And right now we have an application in right next to the Buc-ee's for a car wash. Okay, next quadrant. Yeah.
Get closer to you. The light's on now.
The car wash you're talking about, is that at the 7-Eleven?
No, that's the.
It's a different one.
It's going to be a Buc-ee's car wash.
A Buc-ee's, gotcha.
All right, this next quadrant, this is quadrant, what I call Quadrant C. So this is between Williamson and Clyde Morris, north of LPJ, south of Strickland Range. We've seen Project Theta. This is probably where we're going to see some cottage multifamily go in. It was a good product across the street, and we'll probably see that over here. The LSPD, that's a multifamily development. The Blake, you see the assisted living facility that's going up over by the Blake. There's two out parcels over there on the corner of Williamson and LPGA that we're reviewing. One of them is a fast food, it's a KFC. The other one, I believe, is maybe a hardware store. So we'll see about that. And then we've got Project Sigma, which is kind of a little bit of a larger development, mixed use, which is in an area where there's a lot of wet areas, so they have to kind of work around it. And I think that one's in site plan. At the corner of Blake, there's two out parcels. On the corner out parcel, we're reviewing a KFC, a drive-through KFC. And then right next to that, did the application come in for that? We're expecting an application to come in soon for a small hardware store at that location. Let's see. So this is the Blake? Yeah, so I'll go to the next one. All right, so the next quadrant. This one's a little tricky. You know, this is the one where we have the sanctuary being built at that location, and there's also the bank at that location right across the street over there at the Grand Preserve. We have the Reserve at Strickland. This was a townhome community at Clyde Morris and Strickland Range Road. All of the infrastructure in place. I haven't seen anything start to go vertical yet, but that should be a matter of time since they already have the infrastructure in place. And then we have Project Epsilon, which will probably be another multifamily development that we're in the process of reviewing right now. So, next quadrant. So this is the one you're all familiar with. This is the Tanger Quadrant. We've seen a lot of activity out there already. We've got our Sam's Club. Ashley's is approved, and we're going to probably start seeing construction of the Ashley's, which is right next to the Rooms to Go, which I think turned out fantastic at that location. I think having those uses together, I think is great for the city. I think when people go out to furniture shopping, they're going to stop at Rooms to Go, they're going to go to Ashley. So they got them right next to each other. It saves a little bit on the driving. We've got the Tanger Outlets, Madison Point Apartments, Tomoka Point Apartments. We're seeing some additional restaurants over there. You see that the Ford's Garage opened, Miller's Ale House opened. Across the street from the Ford's Garage, we have Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks is a restaurant that's going in that area. All right. This next quadrant, this is the one that I brought up to you guys before that I said was a big project and it was a good project. This is Quad F, the bulk of which is Project Oasis. Project Oasis is a mixed-use development. It's compact, has a mix of uses, has a good road network going between it, and they save a lot of open space. They protect the wetland area. This is a very good project for the city, and if we could have designed it like that instead of them bringing it to us, that's pretty much the way we would have done it. I think they've done a fantastic job on that. Also includes the Williamson Crossing. So, we got some commercial things going on over there. We see some more out parcels with that. We've got the Edison Apartments, which are just about complete over at that corner. So now you can get, once this is completed, you don't even have to go on LPGA Boulevard. You can just go right through their development and get from Williamson to Clyde Morris. And that saves traffic on LPGA. There's going to be a light there, yes. All right, the last quadrant is Quadrant G. In this particular one, this is where we have B. Braun, the Clyde Morris Landings Apartments, also Atlantic Housing. For the affordable housing, we have that in this location. We're in process of reviewing for additional multifamily in this area. There may be some additional affordable housing in this location as well. I'm not sure what the status of that is, but, and then we've got a couple other things, projects that we had. The 500 East, that was approved probably about 3 years ago. Project Kappa, we haven't seen any activity on that one yet either. So I want to take you to a different area of the city, one that we haven't talked about before. This is located at our I-4 and I-95 interchange. Yeah.
It's on, stop.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, when we had that workshop a couple months ago for the west side of LPGA, I think there was almost around 12,000 units that haven't been built. Is that still about the same?
Probably about the same. I don't have those numbers with me, but it's probably about the same. There wasn't a lot of change since then, but I can get those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, so activity happening in this part of the city where we really haven't seen too much activity happen over the past few years. First one, this is Hillwood. This is the Amazon. This got a lot of attention. This was approved. We just recently approved at the City Commission the rezoning and the land use. Amazon is going up. If you haven't driven by there, it's a 5-story, 2.8 million square feet of warehouse distribution at that location. The next one, Walker's Green. This is a project that was approved probably about 2 or 3 years ago by the City Commission. This is a 391-acre development with 589 units. That gives a density of 1.5 dwelling units an acre. A very low density in this area. So it doesn't, it's something they could have pumped a lot of houses in there, but it's a very limited type of residential development. Another project that was approved, this was done in July of 2022. You recall this was an ILF at one time, and they came back and they converted that to multifamily. They increased the units to 500. So we haven't seen any activity on them yet, submitting anything for a site plan. That would be their next step, is to come in for a site plan application. So a couple other projects that are in process right now. This is Karis. This is a cold storage, so it's similar in the uses that you see with the Hillwood. You're going to have some warehouse distribution. They connect up at the same point. What we'd like to have is a light right over there, and we'd like to see all of the traffic that's coming from Hillwood and coming from the Karis property go to that light and go to where they need to go then. And maybe it takes some of that traffic off of Bevel if possible. So that would be a good opportunity for something like that to happen. Yes.
Do we know what's going to be coming in there yet?
We haven't had anything submitted for that yet. This next one is, and the last one, this is Waypoint. This is the old Curtin property. I believe Coulter is putting this together. This is a mixed-use development that's in staff review. And it'll probably be coming to the City Commission sometime within the next few months. So this is south of I-4 between Tomoka Farms Road and 95. So it's and then right across the street from that is the landfill. South of that is there's a little bit of county property, but after that it's Port Orange, just south of that. All right, I'm almost done here. I wanted to show you two more maps, and these you've already seen. The first one is the development that was going on west of 95. I just wanted to point a couple of things out. We are at our western boundary. There is no place else to go. You'll see out there you got the Tiger Bay State Forest and the Tiger Bay Mitigation Bank. There is no room to push out further west. If you take a look up above us, which is 40, that's Ormond Beach. There's no room for us to go that way. So any development that's going to be occurring out here is not going to occur in this area. We do have a few spots. You see some colors over there along 95, a couple of smaller spots along LPGA that could possibly be developed, but it's smaller in scale, and it'd be interesting to see what comes in for those projects. And the next one, this is again west of 95, and this is south side. So again, Tiger Bay Mitigation Bank, Tiger Bay State Forest, kind of pushes, it creates a border. You're not going to see development go past that, with the exception of where you see that little GI, that purple, that's Fire Tower Road, or also known as Sungate. Sungate. Sungate is a almost 900-acre warehouse distribution facility, which has gotten so much attention that DOT is looking to make modifications to that access to I-4 and 95 at that location. So trucks would be able to just jump right on over there instead of having to come down the road. So DOT is very interested in making some changes to that interchange based on what they're doing with Sungate.
Is the mitigation area, is that the aquifer?
I'm sorry?
Is that mitigation area, is that the aquifer, the recharge area?
You know, we were looking into that. I don't have that answer for you, but we'll have that answer before we get to the City Commission.
Approximately how many acres are left to be developed within the city limits of Daytona Beach?
I'd have to add it up, but all of the large parcels have pretty much gone away. Now we've got the 600 acres where the First Step shelter is. I mean, that's a large area, but you know, you've got some wetland issues over there. We're using it right now as the burrow pit to collect the dirt from that area. So I don't know what type of activity we may see over there as far as development, but that's probably the largest piece of property that we have in a city. After that, we're looking at smaller pockets in different areas of the city. There is a piece of property that's it's north of Clyde Morris, and we have an applicant who is trying to assemble a number of pieces of property, which was there were platted right-of-ways or I should say paper right-of-ways. Some are in the county, some are in the city. He has been working on this for about 3 years to collect all of these properties to be able to make a development work over there. And he's looking for a multifamily development that is approximately 250 units at that location. He's been working really hard to try to assemble all of these properties. He's unable, he's going all around the country trying to find out who owns these properties, and he hasn't been successful in all of them, but he keeps trying. So very diligent. So that might be a project we'll be seeing coming through here. We've been working on that for 3 years on that project. So again, that's the western boundaries of the city. You see the red; those are some of the city roads and the county roads that we were talking about with connections, which was very important. So I'm gonna wrap up here with new developments that we're seeing, and these are things that we're seeing east of Ridgewood. So on the Ridgewood side, and then also on the beach side. Brown & Brown headquarters, that was approved in 2018. The framework multifamily, which I showed you the density there, that was approved in 2022. Project Delta mixed use, that's right over here, right up the street. Excuse me, I'm thinking I had City Hall. That was approved in 2019. Burgoyne, that was approved 2021. That's a mixed use development. Beaches ISB, which is just kind of a cool place. That if you haven't been there, it's a neat place to go to. That was approved in 2021. The Marriott Renaissance Hotel was approved in 2018. They're still working on it. The garage is completed. They're still working on the renovations to the hotel. Once that's done, that's going to be a fantastic piece of property out there. The Silver Hills multifamily. This is an apartment complex that was approved, 60 dwelling units an acre, right on the beach. You usually don't see that. And then we had a smaller project, 613 North Halifax, which was a multifamily project that was approved in 2020. We've got some infill developments that are kind of big projects. We've got the Costco, which is going into One Daytona. That's a big project. We're looking at how the traffic is going to be working all through One Daytona. It's going to be bringing a ton of people into One Daytona, and will do nothing but help that development. The more people you get into the One Daytona, the more successful that development will be. The former Father Lopez site, or the Walmart site, we have an application in for that right now. They're in the very initial stages of that application. It's going to be a while before we see that one actually come through. But that's an infill project that we might have opportunities to see some actual development occur over there. We see the multifamily we saw, at the mall, taking down Macy's and putting in multifamily. Fantastic use of the mall property. The malls are kind of going out of style a little bit. They've got some sea of parking. They've got some stores over there that people aren't going to. They're buying these properties and they're going to put multifamily over there. The multifamily can actually help support the mall. So that's good mixed use in that location. Plus, their access, they've got access all around there. They can go to the north, south, east, west to get out of that property. So that's a good project for them. And then you may not have noticed, but there's been a multifamily development approved over at Jimmy Ann and Dunn. It's a good project. It's something that started to come through about 8 years ago. They got very excited about 3 years ago to get moving forward. And that development, I think that's a good infill development for that location of the city. So some more residential at that location. So, yeah.
Fine. Testing 1, 2, 3. What about the area over where Home Depot is? A lot of stores left that area to go out to Tanger Outlet.
Yeah.
Anything coming over there?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. And I saw in the newspaper, we've had some TRT meetings. We've got one restaurant that's actually two. World of Beer is looking to take over one of the spaces where the old rooms to go is. They were going to be talking about taking that down, and they were going to be putting up a drive-through chicken place, and I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's similar to a Chick-fil-A type place. And I saw a couple of new tenants that were going to be going into the shopping center. So where these things were vacant before, you're going to see more of these things come on. Now, also, when the Costco does come in, that is going to do nothing but help all of the businesses that are along ISB. The Best Buy Center, where Skip's Boots is, once Costco goes in place, what I'm trying to have them do is do a cross connection between those two developments so we can get some of those people from Costco into that shopping center and that shopping center into Costco. We bring those back and forth. Somebody stops, they spend some money. It's good for business in Daytona Beach. So.
I have another question too.
Question?
I do.
Okay.
Our Sam's, where the old Sam's was on Bevel Road, do we have anyone looking at that property?
Well, I've had probably 6, 8 people come in there with different ideas of what they wanted to do. Everything ranging from a church to sell motorcycles to sell, to have, trucks, yeah, selling trucks, RVs, manufacturing, they were talking about doing some manufacturing over there. A T-shirt manufacturing they were talking about doing there. A lot of different types of uses they came in. They haven't been able to make the numbers work. I think it's only a matter of time. I think it's a great location, and I think they find the right use for that. It's going to work out really well. Okay, question. Is Daytona Beach growing any faster than predicted by Bieber? Jim says no. That's from us? From a citizen? Yeah, have you seen the Bieber numbers and what was projected? The last number I saw for Bieber, and I think I gave it to you as well, in 2020, I think what we saw was a number that was probably about 74,000. The last update for this past year was approximately 78,000, so we saw a little bit of a bump there to that. So we're sitting somewhere around 78,000 right now.
The thing I might add to that, Dennis and I looked at those numbers at 78. I thought, given what we've seen, that it might be a little bit low, but that's the Bieber projection. It matters to us for allocation of resources. But in terms of what Bieber shows and what we're knowing, we're relatively close when you have somebody projecting and somebody actually accomplishing something with growth. So the numbers are close, but there is variability between the two. But nevertheless, they're about on the line, and 78 is the number that we saw for the next projected number.
Good evening again. I've got two questions. One is there a projection for when Daytona Beach's vacant land will be built out? And then the second question is, can we do a build-out analysis of the need for future infrastructure? I'm happy to say yes to both of those questions. So Dennis just put a slide up for potable water, and you know, whenever you try to predict the future, you know you're going to be wrong. That's all you know about your answer, is you're going to be wrong. It's almost never right. But what engineers do when we don't have information, we make some assumptions so that we can plan. And we don't know exactly when all this will occur, but we do know eventually that it probably will. Florida is still growing, as the charts showed that Dennis had, and so we make plans and then we adjust those plans as we get closer to the events to account for the uncertainty. So for potable water today, our system demand is about 13.5 million gallons per day. Treatment capacity is 24 million gallons per day, and the CUP allocation, or the consumptive use permit, which is the regulatory part of it, is 16 million gallons per day. We also have in our system a storage volume of 10 million gallons, or we think we need that. We've got some projects that we're working on currently, some filter upgrades, 5 million gallon tank and pump station. That's in the works right now. In fact, it's bid. I think it either just went to commission or is about to. And then we've got some miscellaneous R&R projects. 2030, we're forecasting a potable demand of around 19 million gallons per day. Again, it's within our current treatment capacity, but our consumptive use permit needs to be updated, and we're in that process now doing that. Storage volume at that point would be a little bit more, 12.5 million gallons. That's some more construction that needs to take place. Projects, we would have to do some treatment plant expansion. That's some of the processes within the plant. It's not the entire plant. Do some process improvements and put into place some operational redundancy. That's just things that we do so that if something breaks, we can keep producing clean water. The storage tank is listed there. That's associated with the Avalon project. That's a developer-constructed improvement, and that depends on Avalon actually developing on some kind of a schedule that we projected. And then miscellaneous repair and renovation projects. By 2040, we expect our ultimate demand. It won't exactly be, because there's always redevelopment that takes place, and there's going to be isolated parcels that aren't developed. 26 million gallons per day. We expect to put in place a treatment capacity of around 30 million gallons per day, again, to have some cushion and capacity. The CUP allocation, the regulatory part, would have to be increased again by then. This is almost 20 years in the future by projection. And storage volume about the same, should be adequate going forward. projects that would be needed by 2040, a treatment plant expansion, and miscellaneous repair and renovation projects. We're pretty sure that there will be other stuff that isn't on this list. We just hit the highlights here, so, and the big cost items. If you can go to the next slide, which is wastewater, I'll run through that really quickly for you. Thank you. Combined wastewater flow today, coming to the two plants. We have two plants, one at Bethune Point and one at Westside Regional. The combined wastewater flow is 13.5 million gallons per day right now. That's an average number. Capacity between the two plants is about 28 million gallons per day. So we've got quite a big cushion there in the wastewater treatment area. Now that cushion is divided amongst two plants, and there's more development happening on the west side and higher flows out there. So we do expect to have to expand plant capacity on the west side at some point. Projects that we're working on right now are an influent pump station and headworks at the west side plant, some process improvements and operational redundancy, again, to account for if something breaks, we can still treat our wastewater and discharge it in accordance with our permits, and miscellaneous R&R. By about 2030, we expect the wastewater flow to increase to about 19 million gallons per day. Again, the capacities are the same in the two plants. We expect to need to implement some ultraviolet disinfection improvements for both plants. This kind of replaces chlorine in disinfecting wastewater. Influent pump station and headworks at Bethune Point, some new biosolids dewatering facility improvements at Bethune Point, and some miscellaneous R&R. There's also a regulatory requirement that kicks off, I believe it's at 2032, for effluent disposal, and we expect some projects associated with that so that we can remain in compliance with the regulatory requirements. By about 2040, or whenever the build-out occurs, we expect a combined wastewater flow of 26 million gallons per day. Again, plant capacities will change a little bit on the west side. Bethune Point, we don't expect the flows to increase, but on the west side, where most of the development is occurring, we do expect to have to expand the plant capacity there. And again, perform miscellaneous R&R work. R&R work happens every year, year in and year out. We have an aging but relatively healthy system, and so we need to do the maintenance to keep that in good shape and good operating order. So, thank you. I'm sorry? They aren't. They were a little. I was a little bit late in getting those together. I did bring them in case there was questions, so
right.
we can email those out or
Thank
print
you.
them and give them to you.
Mail them in. We'll have Letitia to put them in your mailboxes so you can put them in your.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
I just want to make one point as well. As planners, we don't usually deal with the water that the utilities department deals with. But we always look for opportunities of what can we do to be able to help with water and conservation of water. Hannah's going to be attending a conference next month. It's a conference to learn how we can maybe change our land development code, make some changes that'll reduce water needs in certain parts of the city. It could be requiring some xeriscape on the landscaping. So maybe on the east side of the city where we use potable water to do the landscaping, if we had opportunities there for some xeriscaping, then we'd be able to save some water. But there's some other ideas. She's going to be working with the utility department, what it is that their focus is, how we can maybe change the land development code to assist in bringing down some of that water need. So, all I have.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, additional questions for staff? Thank you, staff, for the presentation. There are some additional items within the book that if you want to talk with staff later, just contact my office and we'll coordinate with you. But I think this has been very informative, the work that they've done. So I'll turn it over to our acting mayor at this time, Commissioner Mayor Reed.
Thank you, City Manager Fiecher. My question is, where do we go from here? We've received all this information now, so what's next? Anybody? Okay, you're not prepared to answer that question at this time. There you go. Your light's on, Dennis.
Testing, okay, thank you.
That's like me.
Well, we talked about some things we can do internally with maybe changing some code requirements to be able to look at some of the traffic impacts, look at some of the water impacts, what's working, what's not working. We've been working with some of the community groups as well. We always encourage that. So any opportunity we get to work with community groups to do that, we want to do that as well.
And one of the things, based on the conversations that you all had, many discussions came about how much growth do we have, how much more land do we have, should we increase impact fees, should we slow down growth, should we speed up growth? So we wanted to share this information with you all and just let you know what we're doing and some of the things, as Dennis has stated, how do we come back to you all to present items to you to make sure that we continue to do smart growth in Daytona Beach. And this, I think, will help you understand the process, because some may be under the impression that people just come in and we pass it on, but there is a extensive process of all staff members and throughout the departments to get us to the point. You may see periodically if we don't agree with something, that applicant still has the right to bring it to the elected officials. So you may see something that may say in the future, this is at the pleasure of the commission. They meet all the criteria, but Hannah and Dennis may not think it fits for that area, but we still have to bring something to you all because the applicant wants it. So those type of things could come forward, but just wanted to share that information and also with the public.
All right. Colleagues, are there any other questions at this time?
Commissioner Reed, if you would, please. I think there's one other thing that we do, if I may, just future steps. When you see us reaching our western boundary and you see the things that are happening that are all new, the places that are left to redevelop and consolidate and do things are really coming back toward town. I compare it almost as if you had water in a bucket and the wave slashes up against the wall, it bounces back. And so the improvement for the overall community is there, I think, is the next biggest opportunity as we look at filling ourselves as far as new development is concerned. We've got lots of redevelopment that can be done in the center. And just by example, in the building permit program the commission authorized for Midtown, and it's bigger than Midtown per se, we've issued approximately $2 million in building permits at no charge for improvements to be made in Midtown. And the door of consolidation of properties, if people wish to do so, and redevelopment and bring new things to all that area is, in my estimation, the next frontier for the city in terms of bringing all of the city up, and it's an aspect of a rising tide lifting all boats. That is what happens. They don't necessarily lift all at the same time, but there are opportunities that come that way as well. Excuse me for interrupting your flow. I'm sorry about that.
What type of permits are going through in the Midtown area? You said 2 million. How much? What is it exactly?
There are all sorts of building permits. It's different building permits for the work that people are doing. It's a wide assortment. I haven't got a breakdown other than the value. The value of the permits is associated with the value of the work. And so we're not charging for those, but we've kept track of the value in terms of if people were paying for permits. So it's $2 million permit value. The permits wouldn't cost that much. It's, of course, a fraction of the expense. But it's a wide variety of things. Plus, there are grants, which the commission asked questions. You in particular, Commissioner May, wanted to know why grant money wasn't being used. And before Mr. Chisholm left, it was concluded that eliminating the grant, the matching part of the grant, would make it much more likely that people would use the money. And in fact, that's what's occurred.
Mr. Morris, when is that deadline on the current waivers?
The waiver?
Mm-hmm.
It actually, I think, is coming near due, but Mr. Fietcher and I had a written conversation about continuing the program, and the direction Mr. Fietcher had given is to continue the program, which is what I've directed P&L to do.
You right now in the same area?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Colleagues.
And if things would change for other areas, we'll bring back recommendations if we can. But before we close, I just want to thank Commissioner Henry for hosting us here in her zone. So appreciate that. And the staff here at the new name of Parks and Recreation, thank them for setting up, as well as Letitia and her team and the information systems for setting up our first real out of the area workshop meeting with all of their new devices. Thank you.
And I would like to say something, since we don't have a commission meeting till September. TPO had a presentation regarding Mason Avenue. It runs through my zone, your zone, Strickland zone, and they are having a meeting August 30th, next Tuesday, between 7 o'clock at Midtown Culture Center. I would like to encourage your residents to go out there and give input. I don't feel like they've neglected this area for a long time. I mean, I've lived here over 40 years. I have not seen any changes. And I do have some appointments set up with our state representative as well. And I just think we need to encourage them more to put more money in this project. It's between 5:30 and 7 at Midtown Culture Center. So encourage your residents in Zone 5. Thank you.
And information to staff so they can publicize that
Absolutely.
on our public notices. All right, if all hearts and minds are clear, I too would like to thank staff for joining us this evening, thank the city manager for feeding us since he always keeps us so late, and also thank the public for coming out, for not counting it robbery to know what's going on in your city. And for those of you that are joining us virtually, we thank you as well. And I believe that is going to conclude this meeting. Everybody be safe going home. God bless America and God bless Daytona Beach, Florida. Thank you.
Thank you.